Welcome to HeartChangeU live stream. We're glad to have you here today. On Fridays, we've been doing a series on living hope, that we call it. People living with addicts or living with dysfunctional people who are just really struggling. And I tell you what, when you live with someone who's struggling, you struggle. And so we're trying to provide some tools, a lot of different topics that we've talked about, and today we're talking about detaching. I mean, that's an incredible word, because at some point when the pain gets turned up, in order for me to survive, I tend to have to go into some form of shutdown. And many times the addicts that we're dealing with, the dysfunctionals that we're dealing with, they're in shutdown, and so they're able to fire off indiscriminately in a way that's just incredibly painful. And so how do I handle that? Well, I've got to minimize my pain. At any rate, you get into detachment as a management tool. And so we're going to explore that today. We have with us Rebecca.
Hi, it's good to be here.
You might have resembled this topic once or twice.
Yeah.
And Kimberly, good to have you.
Yes, I had a lot of detachment in my life.
Had.
And I've had to detach.
Notice you said had.
I had, yeah.
I mean, is that great or
it's
what?
a positive thing. I think, the thing I notice me saying mostly in the last 2 months is I had. It's not present in my life
and
anymore.
That's exciting.
I love it.
That means that healing is possible.
Amen. Amen.
And
yeah.
you're a living testimony that
Yes.
things can get better and do get better.
Amen. I think one of the questions I would have about detachment, because, we tend to, well, you've talked about the people that we love or the things we love. So we connect to that thing, and some of those things aren't healthy at all, as we've talked about. So how do you detach, first of all, from an unhealthy relationship?
Well,
some steps you take.
Let's just start with point number one. Most of the time, people who need to detach actually need to detach. In other words, the people who struggle with detachment are typically those who have an unhealthy enabling approach. So here I am, I'm caught up in this relationship, I'm codependent, the nice buzzword, and because I'm codependent, I'm getting my value from the response of that other person. And to me, the best definition of a codependent is someone who needs someone else to get healthy for them to feel good about themselves. Now, if you're in a close relationship, you need them to be healthy so that I can have a better life. There's a practical element of that's very real and very practical. And it's like, I need you to get a job. I need you to keep that job. I need some income. Okay, there's need to, and we use the need language. But as soon as we go into, I need you to get better, or I can't feel good about myself, my self-worth is now tied to you and to how you're doing. I'm a mom or a dad, and my son, my daughter isn't doing well. I need you to get better, or I don't feel good about me. Now I've got a level of compulsivity in that thing that's just tight and intertwined, and it gets sick. And frankly, the first step of actually getting healthier with that actually typically is detachment, where I step back, I detach, I get enough space where I can kind of, get my brain back. So there's one part of the detachment process that's absolutely what you need to do, and it's not healthy. There's another part of the detachment that I'm simply going to call shutdown, where in order to detach, I have to harden my heart. I have to make my case against you. I have to, all of the lists of the other. And so there's another part of it that this is unhealthy. And so once you see some of the different pieces of what we're talking about, there's parts of it that are healthy and actually moving you in the right direction. There's parts of it that are unhealthy, and what I talked about, that inner man, I need you to get better. Well, that detachment done the wrong way, it's literally going to kill you on the inside, or make you angry or bitter, or there's all kinds of different responses that are going on in that. So it's like, which version are we talking about? The healthy detachment that's moving me in the right direction, or the unhealthy kind that is just an absolute nightmare towards your future, the other person's future?
Yeah.
Rebecca, you look like you're just have something hanging around there. What's going on?
Well, there's not. Well, and that's what initially I was thinking detachment as a healthy way, and then when you started describing it, I was like, oh no, that's bad. But then we went back to, that it's a positive. And I mean, I know in my life I've had to detach a lot, and I feel it's more of laying it at God's altar than just throwing it away. I mean, there's something productive to be done with it, but it's hard to not pick back up sometimes.
You are that indomitable spirit who can never let go. I will not quit believing. I will not quit trying. So
I feel like that about my houseplants, much less people.
Okay. So in other words, we fight for our plants even. Is that what you're saying?
It's awful. I noticed that the other day. I was like, this plant is dead. It's mostly dead. It's
There's
okay.
no bringing
Let go.
it back to life.
It's not worth the effort. It's
But
not
I
a
won't
person.
give up.
I know. It's bad.
So when you have a person like you who is that person who just won't quit, just won't give up, detachment actually becomes kind of like healthy. It's like, oh, wow, I need to detach in order to start making better decisions. And I included that in the lead up description. So for you, it's like, oh, I get to talk about something healthy today.
Yes.
I get to talk about detaching. But there is a darker side to detachment as well.
Yeah, I think probably for me it was the shutdown.
You're a shutdown person?
Yeah, I just
I'm
would
in shock.
shut down and don't even try to come in, and I mean even shut myself in my room by myself and
With a little hostility
secluded.
mixed in. You got to be angry.
Don't knock on the door.
Yeah,
and
I don't want to talk to you.
Exactly.
Get out of my life.
Yes. I can't talk to you anyway because you never listen. So I'm going to detach myself this way. And then all it would do this word's coming to me, lead into remorse. What did I do? I shouldn't have acted that way. Then I'd open the door, let you in for a while. Oh, then you do something else again, and I'm shutting it again. So
When you're talking remorse, the first thing I thought of is bargaining. How much of the time with God do we bargain? And with addicts, we bargain. It's like, okay, I'll do this if you'll do this. And I'm going to take it back. My first rule that we get angry at other people because they trigger us, and you made me angry, and all of the other things. Every human being, get this down, every human being is going to respond out of who they are. So you go through the bargaining process believing, and be the jerk self here, etc. Women especially on this one, they believe they can make their man right, or they believe they can. I mean, that's part of that who they're created to be. They're created to come alongside and to influence, etc. So they believe that if I can just get the right relationship and I can just do this, you'll suddenly not be you anymore, and you'll respond according to my influence and not according to who you are. And if I'm not able to make you do this is where it's unhealthy. If I'm not able to do that with you, that means there's something wrong with me. Notice what I said. It becomes unhealthy when I need you to get better. Now, there's a need to because of practical reasons. That's like, I need you to get better. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking in terms of self-worth. So if I've got that situation where I need you to respond to me, that need, now my detachment is, all right. You didn't respond according to what I brought, and you're making me look bad, and you're ruining everything inside of me. And so I detach for a while as what? Kind of a temporary punishment. It's almost child's play in a sense. It's kind of, and then when that wears off a little bit, then I go back to bargaining again, and we do some kind of agreement thing. And the reality, we talk a lot around here about this little thing called heart change. And at some point, it's like, all of that is just a game, and it's foolish. You really have to be able to step back and say, how can I develop the kind of relationship? How can we have the kind of interactions that might, notice what I said, might. No individual has power over any other individual, but might get them into a zone of seeing where they're like, oh, that's what I'm doing. I didn't realize I was doing that, owning it. And then being able to have the kind of conversation where we might actually change behavior. But instead what we do, and I'm so glad you brought it, we do these bargaining things of, well, maybe they'll really value the relationship with me to such a degree that if we bargain this way, and if I threaten this, or if I withdraw this, or I go through all of these things, maybe, just maybe, it'll finally have the outcome that I want. We go through those kinds of mindsets, and it doesn't work because it's selfish.
It never had that kind of outcome. I mean, and honestly, now I leave the door open when I'm angry. I even say, hey, you can come in whenever you want. So things have changed. But when I used to shut the door, and I'm specifically talking about the bedroom door because that's where I'd go and pout on my bed. And so I'd sit in there, and I literally would be back there thinking that the guy was going to come to my bedroom door, fling it open, and go, I'm so sorry. It never happened. The door flung open a few times, but it was anger. It was not the situation that I wanted. And so I've learned not to do that. Now, do I still shut the door? Sometimes I can tell, not physical door, but shut down, let's just say emotionally, or I'm just going to turn you off for a while. But I think that is part of the detachment. There's a detachment that had to take place from these voices that I used to hear, from these old memories. That's part of what I love to talk about. I had to detach, and I didn't even know what I needed to detach from. So I just began praying, what is this? What do I need to let go or detach from? And I think I've said it before in one of these, that I literally, the first time I asked that, I saw my abusive old husband, and I saw a vision of me. He's trying to leave me, and he's punishing me and abusing me. And I literally saw me clinging at his ankles saying, don't go, don't go, don't, just clinging to him. And that's an unhealthy thing. And so I had to detach myself from that. But why, we're talking about, your life too. Why are we attracted to those things, and then they get such a hold on us? I'd like to talk about the hold that can take on us, and that's hard to detach from sometimes after years of.
It's another topic, and I don't know that I want to go into it fully. But why do women return to abusers so much of the time? And frankly, I'm actually going to flip this just to make it a short conversation. But I think actually it's partially because of detachment. Now, this is going to be backwards. I'm trying to make it short so that it doesn't become the whole topic. But a woman who has done some level of shutdown, she's already detached from people. She's been wounded. She's detached. She's detached from people. The only people who are able to fight through that detachment, who are able to fight through the shutdown, are people who are over the top. And typically over the top people are the people who end up being the abusers. They know that they're not genuine. They know that they're not real. So they put on a fake persona of niceness. They put on a fake persona of whatever, and they fight through. And so that person who's clinging to an abuser is already detached. They're already shut down. They're already feeling very little. And so the only one who fights through that in their world, even though it's a sick, negative way, tends to be the abuser. The other people come in, they're healthy, they love on the person. It doesn't feel like love because they're in shutdown. So that's kind of the picture that we're dealing with. So much of the time, people who fall prey to this there's a level of shutdown in their own world. And so then that multiplies the level of desperation for the other person to respond. And out of that desperation, then we get caught up in that. Now, again, you've got healthy detachment and unhealthy detachment. Healthy detachment, I recognize all of these unhealthy patterns. I'm like, okay, I need to step back. I need to create some quality relationships. I need to get to a healthier place so that I can see from a better perspective. And Rebecca, that's where you were at. You're kind of like, yeah, I get caught in these zones and I don't know when to quit, and I'm just kind of caught up there. And so, wow, you need to learn healthy detachment. And then the unhealthy is, here I am grabbing at the ankles, begging, hey, oh, abusive one, you who continue to hurt me and beat me up, I can't let go of you. And so you really do have both sides of the spectrum on this one.
I wrote in my notes here as you were talking, which you just said it, the detachment, shutdown, and I wrote sickness.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, I was sick and I couldn't even see it. And I think one of the things about helping someone and not being able to detach from these people that you're trying to pull out, if you would say it that way, is it would also make me not have to face my own stuff and make me feel better. I thought, oh, look what I can do. I can help pull you out when I needed it. And so it was a response to my own need.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing it out of not an overflow or an abundance of what I had been given, but out of a deprived area, I should say.
And that deprived area goes right along with what I was talking about. You're in shutdown, you're struggling, you don't feel loved, etc. So I'm the kid at the garbage dump that don't take me away from the dump. That's my only source of food, and that happens a lot in that whole picture. But if I get back to detachment, what you need, let's change the words. I mean, detachment's a great word just because we get attached in unhealthy ways. But let's just use the word distance. Healthy detachment creates a distance. And here's what happens. When you've got an abuser and you've got a codependent to an abuser, the abuser or the user or whatever will try to force promises, try to force commitments, try to back you into certain things. One of the most powerful things you can do is set up a 24-hour rule, a 48-hour rule, where you begin to say, you know what, I can't make that decision today. I can't make that decision until I consult person A, B, or C, and you know who your person's A, B, or C. And maybe A, B, and C are no people, and they're your no, the little button, Regina has her button, no, I mean, but at some point, if you go to just a straight no person, you may get the courage to say no, but I don't know that you feel good about saying no. And so what you really need, especially part of that detachment comes because you don't have healthy relationship. You need the 48 hours, but during that 48 hours, somewhere in there, I need to connect with someone who's ministering to my stuff on the inside, because codependency comes out of needing the other person to respond. So if I can get with someone who ministers to that deep need inside of me, now I have a much better chance to respond healthy. Number one, slow it down. Number two, connect with something that ministers to that need. And then hopefully during that period of time, you can build a new perspective, because the other person is going to be more likely to get better if the no is a no, it's not what's best. I can't do that, versus a screaming, no, I'm never going to do that. Whenever you're in an excessive place, you're destroying the worth of that other person. So you need to back it down. You need to get it to a slower, cleaner no. Now, here's the problem. If you've been this individual who needs to detach, they're not going to believe your firm no. They might not even believe it if you scream it at them, okay? But but they're not going to believe your firm no. And so now guess what? Now you get to prove it over a period of time, which means you better have the next 48-hour rule. You better have the next connection designed. You better have all of these pieces. And what's ironic, if you're listening to what I'm saying, you get into healthy detachment or get away from unhealthy detachment by having healthy attachment. So if I'm not including that in everything that I'm doing, I'm really am setting myself up for failure.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, because when I had a stalker following me everywhere, and it wouldn't matter where I went, it just would startle behind me. He'd just show up. And one of the things that a wise person told me was, many people I had asked to go tell him to leave me alone. And they'd done it, but he didn't leave me alone. And one of the things I learned was I had to mean it, and I had to say, leave me alone. You know, somebody else go in and do it. You have to make the decision inside you to detach. And when you say it to them, they don't believe you, because I had told him over and over and over and over. And so how would you explain, is it this proving time that you're talking about, or is it your actions immediately?
It's actions. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, a lot of times with little kids, people start to use anger to punish. And they use anger because anger is quicker and easier. You know, if I yelled and the kids jumped. Well, ultimately, if you're in a home where you've got yellers, after a while you can yell and they don't jump. You yell again, you don't jump. And so at some point you just have to keep escalating the anger, because ultimately kids don't respond to anger, they respond to punishment. So in this case of the stalker, at some point you have to understand, first of all, there has to be a no, there has to be a forceful no, it has to be a consistent no. But at some point, there's got to be a moving up the ladder. And that moving up the ladder, in terms of modern legal sense, is a PFA, protection from abuse order, where it's like, look, this is going to stop. I don't know how it's going to stop, but I will take whatever legal steps that I need to take in order to get this to stop. Do you understand me? And at some point, if you're not willing to move up the ladder on those steps, you're not going to be successful, just like with the kids. You can move up the ladder and yell louder and louder and louder, and at some point, they just become more and more deaf. And so somewhere along the line, that the punishment has to come into play. It's like, okay, you're going to bed now. You have all the different things. It has to be action based in the end for it to be effective.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, a simple thing that I had to learn to do, because he was also calling the house all the time. Well, now we have cell phones. You know the number of the guy that's calling you, and I just had to not answer. I had to make the first step, even though I'd said no. But if I picked up the phone every time, that's not making him think no. And so I had to just not answer the phone and walk away from the phone, try to go find something else to do, disconnect. Even that little short disconnection started to lead to more disconnection with that person. And then eventually never phoned, never called, didn't follow me, left town, and it was over.
You get people who are terribly sick, who that doesn't work for, but most of the time, if a situation is not being rewarded, it goes away. I mean, the vast majority of the time, it will work that way.
And there's a weirdness to it. It's like, even you don't want to not answer the phone. Listen, ladies, I'll talk to you right now. They'll find somebody else. And I think part of it is the fear that we don't want them to find somebody else. We're the woman, we're the one, we can, as you said, change this guy or whatever it is. But the truth is, part of it is a fear of not having someone when you're abused, and that I have to keep this person. There's a ton of women out there, and I'm telling you, they will find someone else, and let them go and let them find somebody else and pray for the woman they find, because, it's not going to be easy. But I think there is a fear of losing. There's a competition, you know.
And the abandonment wound that so many of us have.
Yes.
I mean, it just hits it so hard. So.
And it does, and that's why I say the bigger issue is in here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I'm struggling with worth, well, if you need to detach, there's probably something going on in here where your needs aren't being met. You don't feel fulfilled. You don't feel alive. And it's hard to draw those boundaries. It's hard to be that person and lay all of that down in the way that we need to. But if we really care about the other person, we've got to get out of that God complex, you know, that God complex that, well, I'm the only one. If I don't do it, nobody will. And really, if you hear, that's a form of playing God.
Yeah.
And somewhere in there, if my relationship with a person is unhealthy, I need to detach. I need to create separation and space and boundaries. And if I'm unhealthy enough that I'm having a hard time doing it, I need to look in the mirror and go, what do I need to do to get healthy? And so that's obviously on that side. On the other side is the passive or aggressive, actually could be both, detachment of, well, I'm just going to shut down. I'm just not going to feel. I'm just not going to think about it, to where if the person does show up, you become detached because of your woundedness, because of your bitterness. And so obviously that's not good either.
Okay, so how does feeling sorry for someone play into that? Because,
Well,
I mean, it is a pattern that can happen where you're abused, you try to detach, you mean it, they come back, they're sobbing, crying, I'll go the light way, bring you flowers, I'll never do it again, I'm sorry, and you feel sorry for the person, and then they come right back around and do it again, the pattern's repeated. What do you think it is inside of us? Have we have an area in our life where we're feeling sorry for ourselves, so we're feeling sorry for the other person?
Well,
you have something?
Well, and I know, I mean, my struggle with that, like I was talking about the house plants, but at what point, who am I to say that God doesn't have, that God can't heal them or whatever? And so that's where I get hung up on. But I know time is a huge factor that I've seen help that boundary of consistency, not just an I'm sorry, but we've got to back it up with real stuff. But I mean, even this current situation with my child and having to move them out, I know I was very angry during the moment, and I didn't hug them goodbye. I didn't, and I, so my thought has been, how would God love me in that situation? I don't think I loved my child the way God wanted me to, but so, it's not just I feel bad for them, but like what are we supposed to do with that?
I think part of what I teach on the spiritual gifts, and on the one end of the spectrum, you've got the more prophetic response that is a truth, right and wrong, power response, and on the other end of the spectrum is mercy. When you said you feel sorry for them, we tend to exalt at one point. On this issue, people tend to go to one end of the spectrum or the other. And so it's like, the only way they're going to get better, you got to be firm, you got to set boundaries, you got to pound, and then, well, the only way they're going to get better, you've got to love them, you've got to, etc. As you were talking, I came back to belief systems. If I believe that this response on my part will generate a good response in them, that belief system's going to drive me to do whatever it is I need to do. And that's how I've reconciled that in the program is simply the question, are you willing to do what you need to do to get better? Well, there's a problem there. That means I need to have enough knowledge. I need to have enough competency to analyze what is it that you need to do to get better. And chances are, if you're an addict, you don't know the answer to that question. Right. Chances are, if you're a dysfunctional, you don't know. So somebody has to be the adult in the room. And frequently, the codependent is not the adult in the room. So the codependent has to know enough to know that I may feel like I'm the adult in the room because I'm not using or whatever behavior it is, but no, I'm also sick. I also have my issues, so I'm not the adult in the room. So then I need to find somebody who's going to help me with that diagnostic. And that diagnostic is, are you willing to do what you need to do to get better? So at that point, if I'm working with you, okay, I'm potentially, keyword, potentially willing to continue to interact with you if I see that you're willing. So that's number one. In the case of codependence, we have a number two. Can I look in the mirror and say that I'm willing to do what I need to do the way I need to? And frequently the answer is no. The other person might be willing, but a lot of times it's the codependent that's the bigger problem. With the addict, I look at the addict and say, you're messed up. And they're like, oh, yeah, you're right. I sit down with the codependent and they're kind of like, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. What are you pointing the finger at me? And so they're actually not willing. So they have to be willing to get with someone who actually can see the picture, who they believe can see the picture, and create some accountability and boundaries in their own life. If they're willing to do that, and they actually are able to do it, they're willing to do it, they're able to do it, and if the other person is willing and able, now we have a chance to work this through with some current relationship. Mm-hmm. If both sides aren't willing and able, and if both sides don't have somebody to drink in life from and strength and get that identity and that stuff on the inside of them built up, if that's not happening on both sides to the degree that it needs to happen, we're playing the fool here. We're playing the fool thinking we can get better. And frankly, that's what happens 98% of the time. I just pulled it out of thin air. So
that's really good, though.
But what happens is there almost always has to be a level of separation between the codependent and the abuser, user. Virtually has to be a period of separation to start that change process. To where, are you willing? Are you willing? Okay, let's the gun went off and we're at the start of the race and you go and maybe at the end of the first lap we can come back together and begin to do some cooperation, but it just doesn't happen that way very often.
It's making me think I knew a couple years ago where she was being abused and they were married. And I've told people this, even women now, they separated. She separated and left him, and she set a goal and told him, I'm going to separate from you and not divorce you for 6 months and get away from you. And I remember the people in the church thought, oh my gosh, she shouldn't do that, Well, at the end of that 6 months, he had changed. She could visibly see it, that the separation was good for her. She got the help she needed. God worked on him, and they literally moved back in together and have been together ever since. So that's a positive way that worked out, but we're afraid to separate ourselves. God knows the length of time it's going to take, but what I've told women now is you don't have to decide in your head that you're going to divorce them or not have this relationship, but you can figure out, is this healthy? Is this good?
Codependents tend to be wishful thinkers. Mm-hmm. And so it ends up where it's not action-based. There's no diagnostic. They don't find out what's needed, what it would take for the situation to get better. They don't follow through with that. They impose the 6 months, but there's no changes going on during the 6 months. If you're still the same person, when you come back together, you'll still get the same outcomes. Mm-hmm. So if there's not heart change, if there's not substantive change, how do I get heart change? Well, at some point I need to actually understand what's going on, what needs to happen, and make the changes, take the steps that need to happen for it to get there. If that's not going to happen, the 6 months is a total waste.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. As you were talking earlier about the two different roles and positions, we talked about this before. We just think addiction is drugs because that's, a lot of it, sex, whatever. But as you were talking, it was like I got this sense that the codependent is addicted to need.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just kind of plopped in my heart. You're addicted to need.
And not even just need, but to being needed.
Needed, that's a good...
As I
yeah.
said, the need to be needed. I mean, that's so powerful in the codependence. And so then I'm not able to draw those boundaries. I'm not able to take the steps that I need to take.
You like that whole high you get from being needed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And your self-worth is in
It's tied up there.
feeling needed.
Absolutely.
Yep, I get it. That's really good.
You wrote something down. Do you have something else you wanted to throw at us, or?
No, I liked the illustration that you gave, the mercy person versus the prophet, how we can respond, and it just puts things in perspective for me.
And you tend to have the two extremes, and so then you have the people fighting through, and not that you find the middle ground, but somewhere in there it's got to get surrendered to God, to where I'm hearing the voice of God, I'm walking through obedience, I'm drinking in life from God. I have counselors around me who are speaking into me. I'm listening to them. I'm following through with advice. That's how we really get better in the end.
Yeah.
Well, it's been fun talking about detachment, and we've talked about it, positive and negatives, and probably could have said a few more things before we're done. But thank you for joining us again. I'm sure you know people who are in addiction, who are on the codependency side, struggling with this kind of issue. Thank you for passing it on to others. Thank you for listening, passing it on, liking it, continuing to join with us here at HeartChangeU live stream. And we hope that you'll join us next time as we continue with more of this work in equipping God's people to handle some of the difficult things of life.